here's the thing with this team. They are now filled with players who can play basketball in most of the positions on the court most of the time, which is a huge change from where they've been in the past. I mean, the new player or players that they've added, just getting like Fred VanVleet as a ballast, as a solid starting point guard, steer the ship, and he's a small guy and he has weaknesses because that he has weaknesses defensively, but he also understands the game. He knows how to play certain positions. He knows how to communicate. He knows how to recognize coverages. And on offense, he's a good shooter and he's hit pull-up threes and he can run the offense. Then you get a guy like Dylan Brooks who, you want to talk about shooting improvements. I don't know if any of that's real. I don't know what's going on because doesn't he? I feel like he has the exact same form that he's had in the past, but he's shooting like 92% from downtown to start the year. It's pretty weird, but obviously Dylan Brooks is a pain in the butt defensively, hounding people, and he's played on good teams like that before, and so that's another guy. And Ime Udoka there has got a system that he's been great defensively. He came from a defensive lineage of coaching trees, and he was great defensively in Boston, and he has the Rockets playing well defensively. Jabari Smith is in that role, as a starting four and giving them solid minutes. So Jeff Green off the bench is another veteran who can do stuff. And another thing I loved was moving Jalen Green away from the ball. I remember turning on their first preseason game. Fred VanVleet has the ball more, Şengün has the ball more, and Jalen Green off the ball. And I'm going, oh, this is giving me Iverson 99 flashbacks. Like, this feels right. Like, yes. Activate Jalen Green's athleticism and his ability to get downhill and the handoff game and things like that, and don't tax him with the decision-making part of the game. So it's a lot of addition by subtraction for the Rockets. And then the last piece to me is Alperen Şengün. And we talked about him last year, obviously, a very fun, interesting player, but he continues to grow. One, he's been good enough defensively, right? So he's held up defensively. So now you are able to have a defensive system in Houston that is passable and may actually be good. And Cody, if you can build a good defense around Alperen Şengün, then he's a really good player, right? His ceiling as a player is really expansive to me because on the offensive end, and credit to the coaching staff, you can just run a ton of offense through this guy. And last year, whenever the Rockets ran through him as like the direct centerpiece of the system, even though Houston had a really bad team and a really poor offensive rating, the Şengün specific actions were really, really efficient. They were like some of the most efficient actions in the league. And if you turn on any Rockets game right now, what you'll see is the ball goes through him a decent amount, but this court is always wide open. There's always that room to breathe because Şengün is lifted up at the elbow or the three-point line. You can give him the ball at the top of the key. You can play handoff game. He can pass, and then he can back in and get to his post game and his push shot. And he's just smart about his shot selection and when to dime up his teammates. And it's good stuff so far.
I'll talk about the defense in just a second, but offensively, like you said, well, first of all, quirkiness I appreciate. Every jump shot near the top of the key is an adventure. It's like, is he going to go off 1 foot today? Is he going to use his offhand, or is this just going to be a floater? All of it's just very exciting, whenever he decides to take that shot. And then, like you said, we talk about Jokic being and again, I think our word of the season has been passe so far, but I think it's passe at this point to be oh, he's just a, poor man's Jokic type of thing. But the short mid-range game for him has improved significantly, and that's one of those numbers that I'm keeping my eye on because he's doing a really good job of getting his, he's huge, Ben, and I've heard that he's grown throughout the season. He's super long, so when he gets down a few feet away from the basket, not right underneath, but in that short mid-range area, he's currently shooting 57% at that area. And out of 125 players in the league that have taken over 3 short mid-range shots per 100 possessions, that's 10th in the league right now. That's 10th. That's a really efficient shot. And when you combine that with a guy that if you play him in single coverage, he can take that shot. But if you try and rotate a defender to do something about it, he's going to find an open player. And with somebody like Jalen Green being off ball, who can cut in, he can explode like he's able to do and get to the basket, like, it just opens up a lot of doors for them, right? I think he's shooting like 60% from long mid-range. That's not sustainable. Like, that's not going to hold up. I think he's been in like the low 30s his last couple of seasons. But yeah, defensively, I think his length shocks people. Like, that's something that I've been noticing is when he goes to contest people, it's like, oh, wow, he's all of a sudden like at their apex, like bothering them. So across the board, Sengun just looks significantly better than last year.
Yeah, I think defensively can still be a little bit of a mixed bag just because of the athletic traits and things like that. So sometimes you're near the basket. It's the same thing with Jokic. Sometimes you're near the basket. You just don't have that apex, high contest on a shot or a block or the ability to deter the team from shooting in the paint. But like you said, he does have possessions that catch people off guard. I think his positioning has been bad. I think all of the Rockets, from what I've seen, you don't have the colossal defensive breakdowns that you have in the past. And then on the offensive side, to your point, when you make the comparison to Jokic, there are obvious things there. Last year we did the whole Bizarro Jokic thing. But I think what's more important, what's more instructional, is the archetype. It has nothing to do with the fact that they have similarities. It's like, what happens when you can run the offense, when your center becomes the centerpiece of the offense? That's what's so interesting. Defensive stars used to be big men, or big men used to be defensive stars. And now we have these big men that are offensive centerpieces that you're almost trying to protect defensively and hold water defensively. So the cool thing to me about the Rockets in terms of legitimately being a team that could get into the 40s in wins and like make the top 10 in the West or something like that, because I do think they're going to be competitive throughout the year. Whether it trails off like Utah last year or not is a question. But the cool thing is, if you put enough defensive players out there on the floor and you defend well enough as a team, I think you have a nice floor for an offense with Sengun basically as the centerpiece, even if that floor is league average. A league average offense and a slightly above average defense should be a playoff team. And I think that's what's really cool about this start to the season, where they've won 6 in a row and they look pretty competitive, because that's sustainable for the year.
And going into the season, I was more excited about their defense. Like, I thought their defensive personnel was such that I'm like, okay, this would be a pretty good team. And they've shown it. They're 4 points, almost 4.5 points better than league average on defense. But offensively, they're hovering just around league average. There's a lot of room for growth there. And that's a lot of room for growth that I see being able to happen, right? Like, it's not like an off chance that they pull it off. So this team, I don't know, this team could be pretty dangerous if they play their cards right.
Yeah. One final thought here is that Sengun does have sort of like, as we said, mixed bag numbers when we look at our rim protection numbers. So we'll see how well that defensive value can hold up. But they're really fun.
Thanks for listening. You can find the full episode of This Thinking Basketball podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts.